Today is the result of quite a few months preparation for me. Over the next few months on the shooting show, you're going to see me undertake a number of ballistic tests in order for you to understand your calibers and the types of bullets that you use a little bit better. We're going to be using ballistic gel and we're going to be using ballistic soap. The ballistic gel is a new synthetic type which isn't affected by temperature or humidity. It's quite easy to reconstitute and it's very, very clear. So I hope to be able to bring you some really quite extraordinary pictures of what your bullets do inside a soft tissue medium. The ballistic gel is going to be strapped to a level plank that I've put out here on the hillside. You need to shoot it as flat as you possibly can so that you get a nice straight trajectory through it. And the ballistic soap is going to allow us to measure fairly accurately what the permanent wound channel of each caliber produces. What we're going to do is shoot 3 different bullet types of a .308 Winchester. We've got the 3 bullet constructions that Geco produce. We've got the Geco Plus, we've got the Geco Express, and we've also got the Geco Telemantle, which is the standard soft point. We'll start with 170 grain soft point. Geco call this the Telemantle. I've shot this through a lot of test rifles over the year. I've hunted with it as well, and performance has been pretty much exactly as you would expect. In terms of what they say on the back, this little graph that they produce here, the 3 criteria which stand out: precision, flat trajectory, knockdown power. What we'll do is I will get the trajectories and muzzle velocities and energies up on the screen so you can have a look at those. And really this is just the classic bullet. This is a standard soft point and should be sort of all-encompassing. Next we have the Geco Express. We can see here that this bullet clearly has a polymer tip. However, it's not a ballistic tip in the traditional sense. What we have here is essentially a covered hollow point, providing a bullet with excellent aerodynamics and a high BC. According to the stats, it achieves this while maintaining controlled expansion, providing rapid and high energy knockdown performance. These are characteristics you would expect from a premium bullet, but Geco are offering it at a very affordable level. Lastly, we get to the Geco Plus. Now this is the first chance I've had to shoot the Geco Plus. I put it on some targets further down the range and it's shooting great. I've got it where I need to get it on point for the block. In terms of what Geco say it's suitable for, we're looking at small medium deer, we're looking at boar, and we're looking at big body deer. It looks like a picture of a stag that they've got on the back here. So this really is what Geco are pitching as the round to use if you're wanting to shoot those heavier bodied, bigger boned species. What we're going to do is we're going to get over there, we're going to get the rifle set up, we're going to shoot the blocks, we're going to shoot the soap, and then we're going to see exactly what story it tells. Well, that's it, we're ready to go. Rifle's set up, blocks are on the board. I have to admit that I'm more than just a little bit excited about the prospect of shooting the gel for the first time. What the ballistic gel is representing is the soft tissue in an animal. Now the bullets will obviously behave differently if they're hitting any kind of harder medium before they hit the soft tissue in the center of an animal. We've all seen that when you clip a rib, when you're going into a deer, for example. You end up with a very different kind of damage and bullet performance. So what we're going to see here is purely soft tissue performance. But anyway, let's get shooting. We've got block 1, shot 1 of bullet 1. Let's see what happens. Wow. Well, this is interesting. And look what we have here. We've got the bullet. Not what I expected. But even without actually doing the measurements, which we'll do when we get back, you can get a pretty good idea of exactly what's gone on here. The bullet which penetrated the least was the Geco Plus, and I found it between the two blocks. It had just enough energy to pop out, and it did cause some damage just on the front edge of the second block, but not enough to actually force this very well expanded bullet through into the gel, and it was just lying on the wood here. And the Geco Express and the Telemantle, which is the standard soft point, seem to have penetrated pretty much the same amount. Possibly the standard soft point has penetrated a tad further. Well, what we need to do now is I'm going to go back, I'm going to get these cleaned up so that you can get a really good picture inside, and we can talk about the wound tracks side by side and get a really good comparison. Now that we're back, we can really dig into the results. The first thing is that my hillside evaluation of penetration was actually incorrect. What I neglected to remember was that I've reconstituted the blocks into a longer block now. So when I said that the Geco Plus actually penetrated the least, that was actually wrong. And now that I've taken the measurements correctly, given the Express block, which I had shot previously, we can see that they tie in a lot more in line with what I was expecting. So I've taken the measurements, I've got it on my computer, so let's just go through each one and see what story it tells. Let's start with the Express. Now we can see, if we look at the block here, explosive. Within the first few inches, we've got the vast majority of the fracturing in the block. There's a lot of fragments coming off. We can see in the center the little plastic tip. And as we get to about halfway along the block here, and I'm going to put all these actual numbers and statistics for comparison up on the screen, we can see that the energy is starting to peter off. It's blown most of its energy into the block. About another 2 inches beyond the end here, the bullet stops, and I've got the bullet just down here, and we're going to weigh that in a little bit. If we now turn our attention to the Geco soft point, we can see we've got a fairly even wound track and fracturing along here. It stops about a third of the way along, and then we end up with the bullet shedding quite a lot of lead. And we can see if we look along this tract here right to the end of the block, and I shot into the back end of this block, this is where the bullet was caught, we can see bits of lead starting to shed. Lastly, we've got the Geco Plus. Now this is probably the most interesting of the three. If we look right where it entered, we can see about half a dozen little fragments of the copper jacket. They haven't gone very far, but each one of those, I'm assuming, is from the nose of the bullet. You can actually see pre-fractures in the nose so that you end up with a nice controlled expansion. You have a brilliant wound channel and a lot of energy released over quite a length. The actual fracturing track of the Geco Plus is the most extreme for the longest period, and that really is quite interesting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out this bullet, we're going to weigh them, and we're going to have a little look at bullet weight retention. If I just have a look at what I've got written down here, and I've worked out in percent, the Geco Plus, which of course is our big game round, has a weight retention of 96%, which is very good. And it is also the widest in diameter. It has the biggest mushrooming effect. So that's exactly what you want when you're talking about dropping big game. Of course, you also want penetration. It didn't actually penetrate the furthest, which was a bit surprising. The soft point did, but it did have the longest fracturing channel beyond the actual just diameter of the bullet traveling. So although the penetration was not quite as far, the penetration that was causing damage beyond the diameter of the bullet was indeed the greatest. With the lowest weight retention, surprisingly, it was actually the soft point. The Express had a weight retained of 72%, and soft point was 70%, so just a hair's breadth between them. In terms of the ballistics inside the block, it is exactly in line with what you would expect comparing those two. With the greatest penetration of all three, we have the soft point at 68 centimeters, and with the least and most explosive early on in the block, we had the Express. I'm also going to put up the permanent wound cavities that we've tested in the ballistic soap. We're going to talk more about ballistic soap and a lot more to do with different bullet types, distances, velocities in the coming weeks. But this is just a taster. It's too much to go into any more detail, but what I'm going to try and do is deliver this in a way that's manageable and digestible. If you really want to get into this, it gets incredibly complicated. I'm going to go back up to the range, do a bit more testing, and in a few weeks' time you'll see a little bit more.